The European Union faces growing threats, Russia at our borders, uncertain alliances, a world shifting around us. Can Europe afford division? The European Union was built on the idea that decisions should be made as closely as possible to the people they affect. This principle is called subsidiarity. But in the wake of the Ukraine-Russia war, the EU is facing a challenge. Can subsidiarity work in a time of crisis, or has the war revealed its limits? To understand the EU's response to Ukraine, we must first explore what subsidiarity really means. Subsidiarity ensures that decisions are made at the lowest possible level. National governments, not EU institutions, decide key policies. But in a crisis, does this principle hold up? The war in Ukraine has tested subsidiarity like never before. For some, subsidiarity is the key to a strong Europe. Three major areas highlight this tension: defense, humanitarian aid, and sanctions. Some argue that defense is a national issue, yet the EU has collectively sent weapons, funding, and training to Ukraine. But does this violate subsidiarity? Not all EU nations agree on war. Should Brussels force military aid, sanctions, or weapons production? Or should nations decide their role in the conflict? When allies like the US waver, subsidiarity allows Europe to strengthen itself on its own terms. Millions fled the war, overwhelming national asylum systems. The EU responded with a collective directive overriding national immigration policies. A necessity or a breach of subsidiarity? Sanctions are another example. The EU has imposed 13 rounds of sanctions, but Hungary resisted, citing national sovereignty. Can the EU force compliance, or does subsidiarity allow opt-outs? When Russia invaded Ukraine, Europe needed unity. But individual nations debated while Putin advanced. Commentators warned that subsidiarity weakens Europe, preventing a unified response. What does this say about EU sovereignty? With Trump cutting military aid, the EU is left to fill the gap. But does this force European nations into unwanted commitments, undermining subsidiarity? With Trump threatening NATO's role, Europe must act as one. Can it afford to let individual states decide defense policy? Russia weaponized energy. But should the EU take control of energy policy, or should each nation decide for itself? Beyond war, economic interests are at play. Ukraine holds major reserves of rare earth minerals, critical for Western technology companies. Some fear that economic deals with the US may limit EU decision-making. This symbolizes how economic pressures influence EU policy. Is the EU truly making independent decisions? So what does this all mean for subsidiarity? The Ukraine war has shown that in crises, national decision-making often gives way to EU-wide action. But as the EU steps in, national governments ask, how much control should we surrender? One thing is clear, subsidiarity is no longer just a legal principle. It is the battleground for the future of the European Union. Europe must remain strong, a union that acts when needed. Nations that lead when possible. This is subsidiarity in action.